Okay, to our next, in fact, our first company. It is Pensana. It's developing one of the world's largest rare earth deposits. It listed on the London Stock Exchange's main market just 4 years ago, 2020. Its market cap today is £58 million. I'm delighted to introduce the chairman, Paul Atherley. Very good to see you, Paul.
Good to see you, Sarah. Thank you. Tim, I wonder if we could have the first slide, please. Just while Tim's bringing up the first slide, we are, as Sarah said, we're looking to develop one of the world's largest undeveloped rare earth projects. And Emily mentioned the battery EV supply chain. We are not quite part of that. We're part of the bit that makes cars go. We're part of the axial motors supply chain. So what makes a Tesla 3 Sport nearly as fast as Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes off the grid line is not just the EV battery, but it's actual these ultra powerful axial motors. And what makes them super powerful are these rare earth magnets, and we're part of that rare earth magnet supply chain. Next slide, please, Tim. As Sarah mentioned, we've got a market capitalization of £58 million. We are unusual that we are funded by our major shareholders. So the Angolan Sovereign Wealth Fund owns 26%. They've put in $50 million into the company so far. M&G put in 22 million. And even more unusually, the chairman, myself, I put in $1 million, much to the concern of my daughter. Next slide, please, Tim. As Emily has mentioned, and as somebody's mentioned previously, we're on an irreversible path to far greater electrification in the transport systems, and that's echoed by the IEA studies that we're going to have a tenfold increase in EVs, and that's going to translate into a 400% increase in demand for rare earths, and that's the market that we're addressing. Next slide, please. And just to summarize our position is we're a company that's delivering into, this is the biggest energy transition in history, and a 7.5% compound average growth rate of the metals and magnets that go into electric vehicles, offshore wind. We own one of only three undeveloped rare earth deposits that have more than 100,000 tons of NdPr. We're globally significant at 5% of annual production. And we've managed to engineer the project so the upfront capital cost is $200 million, which is one of the lowest amongst its peer group. And as I mentioned at the outset, we're actually financing at the moment. So we have three financiers. That is FSDA, the Angolan Sovereign Wealth Fund. They're our biggest shareholder. ABSA, a large bank from South Africa, and a number of African multilateral agencies who are working with us. And they're all financing at the subsidiary level. So we're not looking to finance at the Pensana level. We're looking to finance at the asset level. And then separately from that, as an event subsequent to the financing of the mine, we are looking to develop the Salt End, a facility at Salt End, the Salt End Chemicals Park in Humber in the Freeport, that'll take these rare earths, separate them, and put us on the supply chain all the way down to magnets. Next slide, please. The mine itself is located in Angola in West Africa. It's super high grade. It's got a 20-year mine life. It's only 30 meters deep, and it has the advantage of being connected to hydroelectric power, close to a major railway line, and plenty of available water. Next slide, please. Angola itself is becoming the go-to destination for mining investment at the moment. It's got 40 years of virtually no exploration. It's got an untapped critical minerals endowment. It's got exceptional infrastructure, a rail, hydro, port, and a highly supportive government. So it's not surprising you see companies like Anglo American, De Beers, and more recently Ivanhoe. Robert Friedland has entered the country. Next slide, please. The mine itself is located very, very close to the Longondra railway station. We are, as I mentioned, an upfront capital cost of $200 million, $100 million deferred to year through. And at full production, we'll produce around 40,000 tons of a product called an MREC, which is a mixed rare earth carbonate. And within that mixed rare earth carbonate contains 4,500 tons of NdPr, which is about 5% of world annual production. Next slide, please. What makes the projects, one of the reasons why the project is low capital cost and a relatively short delivery time is that it's modular. So we're having each of these circuits manufactured off-site and then brought to site and basically assembled on site. So not quite an IKEA plant, but that's that idea. And then each one of these circuits, if you take the flotation circuit, for instance, they have been extensively pilot tested in laboratories in Australia. So thoroughly tested circuit, modular, and on site, basically just bolted together. Next slide, please. And the companies that are doing is a specialist in their MCC or our project management team, but ADP and ProProcess, these are teams that are specialists in modular construction. So you can see the truck on the right-hand side there that contains a bit of kit that'll get bolted together and turned into one of those circuits. Next slide, please. And we're well underway. The earthworks are well advanced. We've completed a 4.5 kilometer road upgrade to the station from the mine, completed power lines, and what you're seeing here are the foundations for a 350-man personnel camp that's currently being fabricated in Johannesburg and will be brought to site and put on these footings shortly. Next slide, please. The timeline is we're well into it. We'll be doing these earthworks and pre-construction activities for the next couple of months. And then from May onwards, we're into the main construction, which is around 12 months. And then we're into commissioning the middle of next year. So we're aiming to be in full production from January 26 onwards. Next slide, please. We recently had a visit from the full board of the Angolan Sovereign Wealth Fund. It was great to host Chairman Armando Manuel to site, and very pleased to say they were delighted with progress on site. Next slide, please. Just to give you a snapshot of just the mine and the processing facility is obviously we're dependent on what future commodity prices are going to be. So we've gone to Adamas Intelligence, which is one of the more highly regarded forecasting agencies, and chosen one of the investment banks in London, taken their forecasts and run the numbers through our model. And you can see there that whether you take the lower case, the investment bank, their forecast and NPV would be $600 million with very, very good IRR and very strong cash flow. And if you take the base case of Adamas, then it's we're talking about a valuation of over $1 billion US. Next slide, please. Tim George, our CEO, was in Luanda recently. He met with Chairman Armando and very pleased that the Angolan Sovereign Wealth Fund is providing us with a $15 million loan facility to keep the momentum going on site whilst we're financing. The financing itself will be FSDA and a Pan-African multilateral development organization. They're looking to put $80 million worth of equity into the subsidiary level, basically the asset level for the company. And then the debt, the $120 million of debt is being arranged by Absa Bank and together with export credit guarantees from ECIC and debt participation from Pan-African multilateral. We aim to have the whole $200 million in place and announced hopefully in the next few weeks, and hope to make the announcement on that shortly. Next slide, please. The offtake's really interesting. We're one of the few mines in the world that's going to come on stream in the next few years. We are looking to offer a high value, radionuclide free MREC product available for export. We've had huge interest in the product, and we've executed a letter of intent for the offtake for 100% of stage one. So we've got a lot of demand for the product. We're going through qualification and hope to have these agreements finalized through Q1. And what these companies are looking for, they're looking for mine-to-magnet transparency. So we've heard lots of stories about concerns about rare earths coming from places like Myanmar and the ecocide and environmental disasters associated with that. They're also looking for an ultra low embedded carbon product. So clearly, if we're using hydroelectric power, we've got low embedded carbon. diversifying their supply, that's important for them, and obviously competitive pricing. Next slide, please. So the mining and the processing is step one for us of a four-stage process. Step one basically gets us going with the mining, producing a mixed rare earth carbonate. Step two is at the Saltend Chemical Park in the UK. Those of you who know it, it's the ex-BP Chemicals Park in the Humber Freeport, and that'll separate those rare earths into oxides. And then we are looking to go one step further to metallisation, turn that oxide into a metal using hydroelectric power from the Dogger Bank offshore wind farm. And then we're teaming up with a magnet partner to see if we can then turn those into magnets. So upstream, what we're seeing today is step one of a four-stage project. Next slide, please. And to that, the UK government has recognised the importance of this supply chain. Emily mentioned it before. The UK needs to establish gigafactories. It also needs to establish a conversion of this current massive car industry in the UK, export driven. The UK makes internal combustion engines. That needs to change from internal combustion engines to electric drive units, basically axial motors. And to that, we need a secure magnet metal supply chain. And the Secretary of State for Business very kindly has offered us a grant to help us move down that track. Next slide, please. And the Saltend Chemicals Park, those of you who know it in the Humber Freeport, is a very well-established chemicals park. As Emily mentioned in the previous presentation, chemical parks are incredibly important in the supply chains, whether it be for the lithium-ion battery supply chain or for magnet metals. These are complex chemical processes that are best done within these environments. In our case, ours is a world-class separation circuit that will produce 12,000 tons of rare earth oxides, 5% of the world's NdPr oxide, and along the way create 150 full-time jobs in the UK. Next slide, please. Recently had a delegation from our major shareholders, M&G, a whole bunch of government departments and local stakeholders, and all showing huge interest in the developments at Saltend. Next slide, please. And very pleased that William Izard, our Chief Commercial Officer, signed a deal with Chris Turner from the Yorkshire Energy Park just across the road from Saltend, which basically says that if we can produce a rare earth oxide at Saltend, we can take it across the road to the Yorkshire Energy Park, hook into the connections for offshore wind, and then convert those oxides into a metal that we can then work with our magnet partners to turn into magnets. Next slide. And again, Emily mentioned that the UK is a big exporter to the European markets, not just of cars, it's also of hopefully electric drive units. So aiming to produce 2 to 3 million EDUs to the European market by 2030. And it's important that to achieve that, these OEMs need a supply chain. Next slide, please. And we're aiming to be part of that supply chain. So the UK government is already working on electrical grade steels, rotor stator manufacture, but needs the bit that we've got, which is to go from rare earth oxides into metals, into magnets, to go into those EDUs. So we're working closely with government and partners to help create that supply chain. Next slide, please. We announced that we were invited to join a partnership with Polestar. Polestar have created this moonshot Golf, the Polestar Zero, the first climate neutral car. And the way they're approaching it is they're saying all the raw materials that have got to go into their car have got to be zero carbon or as close to it as you can. So they looked at all the rare earth suppliers around the world, and we're very pleased that we were selected as the partner for the Polestar Zero climate neutral car project. So a very, very exciting project to be involved with. Next slide, please. And then, as Emily mentioned, urban recycling. Well, we're not urban. We're looking at urban recycling. We're thinking of a much larger scale. The world's biggest or second biggest offshore wind farm is called Dogger Bank. It's the one that will power us at Yorkshire Energy Park. It comprises a large number of Haliades X 260-meter high 14 megawatt turbines. When they reach the end of their life, they'll get taken down, taken apart, demagnetized. And the plan is to bring them to us, use the hydrogen produced by Equinor at the Humber to Hydrogen to Humber project at Salt End, just happens to be at Salt End, and we can decrepitate those magnets and turn them back either into metal hydride or a metal oxide, and creating the circular economy. Next slide, please. We have a strong independent board and some very, very capable and talented people making all this happen whilst I can tell the story about it. Next slide, please. Now, just in summary, as Sarah mentioned, we've been listed for 4 years. We've made huge progress, developed one of the world's largest undeveloped rare earth projects. It's one of only 3 with a resource more than 100,000 tons of NdPr with a capital cost of less than around $200 million. We're looking to complete financing in the next little while. And if we achieve that, our only 2 competitors out there who are in production are MP Materials and Linus, and they have market capitalizations of 3 billion and 4 billion US dollars respectively. So we have a lot of headroom if we get this right. Sarah, I hope that was helpful.
Certainly was helpful, and there's lots of handshaking going on as well. So 2 very quick questions, because we are overrunning. Just for the benefit of doubt, Salt End, is it ready? Does it need any refurbishment, any construction? That's one of Leonard's concerns.
Salt End site is fully approved. It's ready to go. We just need to, what we've decided to do is finance the mine first. As soon as that's financed, then we'll finance and start construction at Salt End. So literally fully permitted, ready to go.
And finally, that is quite a substantial personal investment that you've put into the business. So I'm just wondering when you hope to get your daughter's inheritance back.
um, I think the reality is for these projects is that they have a cycle of around 5 years. And so if we take 5 years from now, I hope that we've constructed, commissioned, gone into full production, maybe even looking at an expansion. And at that point, maybe some time to take some money off the table.
Lovely. Paul, thank you very much for your time. And yes, it was extremely helpful. Thank you. Take care.